Welcome folks, my name is Tom Beatty. I'm the chair of the Web Design and Development program at Newmont College of Computer Science, and today we're going to do some JavaScript programming. Okay, since this is our first video on JavaScript, I'm going to start from the beginning. We need to have some sort of editor to work with. I'm using VS Code or Visual Studio Code. You can use Notepad++, Sublime, brackets, whatever. Any sort of editor should work. If you want to use Visual Studio Code like I am, just go to code.visualstudio.com, download the stable build, install it, and you'll be good to go. So let me close that here, and I'm going to create a new folder, put that somewhere on your hard drive. Maybe you want that in your documents folder, whatever. I'm just putting mine on my D drive in tutorials. So I'm going to create a folder, and we'll call this JavaScript Basics. I'll go in there, and this is where we'll start. So inside Visual Studio Code, when you load it up, you'll probably get a screen something like this with a welcome page. The first thing I want to do is I want to move to that folder that I just created so that I'm working in that space. And I can either click this open folder or just come up here to File, Open Folder, and then navigate to where I want to be. So let's see, that's going to put me in Tutorials, JavaScript Basics. Select the folder, and we're ready to get started. I'm going to close the welcome screen, so I've got nothing open or available at the moment, and I'm going to create a new file, and I can do that right up here under my JavaScript Basics that it has put there as my current folder. And I'm going to click this first icon. If I roll over it, it says New File, and I'm going to need an index.html. You need HTML. When we're doing front-end JavaScript, you need an HTML file that actually loads it and accesses it. And then I'm going to create a script.js. That is my actual JavaScript file. So that's where we're going to code. I'm going to hit Control+ a few times to make the text bigger so it's easier for you watching this video to see it. Now I'm going to start in my index.html. You can see that selected here. I've got it selected here. And this video really isn't about working with HTML, so I'm going to use some shortcuts to quickly generate some. In VS Code, I can hit exclamation point, enter, and it will generate a basic HTML file for me. And now I'm going to tell it to load my script. So inside the body, if you're not using VS Code, pause the video and copy what you have here. In truth, you don't need all of it. You wouldn't need the meta tags. You're going to want the doc type, the HTML, the head, and the body at very least. And then make sure you get your close tags in there. If you want to learn more about HTML, give me time. I'll create some videos to teach you more about it. So I'm going to add a script tag, and the source is going to be script.js. And I know I said source, it's just src that you put there. And VS Code will automatically write your close script for you. And this should load up our JavaScript. Now HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is the core for creating content pages in on the internet for your browser. So let me go ahead and save that, and I'm just hitting Control S to save. If you really want to, you can go up to File and Save, but just remember Control S. You can tell a file isn't saved if you've made changes because it'll have a little circle here. So if I make changes, you know, the circle appears. If I hit Control S, it disappears, and we just have the X to close. So anyway, that's saved. We are theoretically loading our script that we've created. If we go over now to the JavaScript file that we have, we don't have any content there yet, so we need to put something in there. I'm just going to put a console.log. That's going to output to the console. And you can use either double quotes or single quotes, it doesn't matter in JavaScript. And I will say, hello world. Put a semicolon at the end. Save it. And now let's test this out. And the easiest way to test it, let me actually go to my folder. If I just double click on index.html, it will load that in my browser, in whatever my default browser is. In my case it's Chrome, but whatever you're using on your machine. And so here it comes, and at the moment it shows me nothing. And the reason it's showing me nothing is because I outputted to the console. And so I'm going to hit F12 and make sure that I have console selected. Elements might be, but choose console, and sure enough it says hello world, and it's saying that that is being brought up from my script.js file, line 1, which sure enough, that's it right there. Okay, so we've got our first JavaScript. It runs, it works, and it's outputting to the console. I think we can do something cooler. So let's work with that a little bit. So I'll leave that there, I guess, for now. And I'm going to create a variable. And if you're familiar with other programming languages, you've dealt with variables before, probably. Variables can hold all sorts of data, anything from numbers, groups of letters or other characters. They're more complex variables. Arrays, for instance, can hold several different types of objects in them. In JavaScript, there are multiple ways of declaring a variable. The old way is using var, and that's var for variable, and I could give it a name like a. It's not very descriptive, but I'll put in there, I'll say a equals 5. And then I can console log a and save that. Control S again. Come on over into my file here, and you'll notice it hasn't shown up. That's because we need to refresh the page. And so I can just hit refresh right here, and now we have hello world, and we have 5. Now, in JavaScript, we've got a few different types of variables. We've got numbers, we've got strings. A string is just a group of characters. For instance, I could say Bob, for instance. Save it. Come on back. Hello world, and then Bob. And then we've got booleans, and a boolean is just true or false. And so I could just say a equals true. And we'll talk about how all these are used later, but for now, just understand that those exist. Now, in a lot of languages, when you initially declare and define a variable, you have to say what type of variable is it. Is it an integer? Is it going to be a string? Is it going to be a boolean? And once you set that type, you can't change it. JavaScript is what's known as a dynamically typed language, which means once you set a variable, you can change it to whatever you want. So at the moment, a equals 5, it's a number. But I could now say a equals Fred. And then console log a. Refresh. A first equals 5, and then it equals Fred. So we can change its type. And that's what a dynamically typed language is all about. Now, I'm using var here to define this variable. That was standard for what's known as ECMAScript 5. That's the ECMAScript is what JavaScript is built on. And ECMAScript 5 is what we used for years and years. And in 2015, ECMAScript got updated. They called it at first ECMAScript 6, but then they changed it to ES 2015 because they decided they're going to be updating ECMAScript every year. And so there are changes that have happened that have made improvements to the JavaScript language. And I'm going to try, as I go through these videos, I'm going to show you the newer versions. Most of what we do will be known as ES 2015 compatible. I'm going to show you the older versions too as we go, just so you understand the changes. Older browsers will not be able to support the latest stuff, but again, these changes were made back in 2015, so all of your newer browsers support it. Eventually I'll make a video to show you how to transpile or convert the code that we do back into ECMAScript 5 or ES5 so that it'll work on much older browsers as well. But for now, I'm going to teach you the new standards, and I'll mention the old standards. Now, var is an older standard, but they have since added let. And so you can say let b equals 7. And it works basically the same way. The difference is in scoping, and we'll talk about how that actually affects the variables and how you use them a little bit later. I need to teach you some more things before that makes sense. But from here on out, we'll probably be using let and maybe sometimes const. And const is a constant. And when you set a constant, you can't change its value without getting an error. So I'm going to say C equals Sally. Now, if I go console.log b, comma C, I can refresh, and there's 7 and Sally, which is showing me B and C. I can get a little more creative here. Let me change A back into, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of this line. So A now equals 5, B equals 7. And so if I wanted to, I could say console log A plus B, or 5 plus 7. And if I refresh, it added them together and I got 12. Now I wonder what would happen if I decided to add A plus C, which is Sally. If I refresh, I get 5 Sally. It concatenated, or took the two and squished them together. And you can concatenate strings with other strings. You can concatenate numbers with strings. There are some places that can create some problems. But I could do C plus A, and sure enough, that works too. In some older browsers, that can cause some problems, and we'll again talk about that in a future video. Okay, so we've got numbers, we've got consts. Now, I mentioned with a const, you can't change the value once you've assigned it. So if I were to now say C equals Fred, and refresh, I get an error. Assignment to constant variable. So I can't change that value once I've set it. And consts can be useful if you want to make sure that you set a value to something and that no one else changes it at any other point. So let me just get rid of that. Now we see some of the basics. Now, I mentioned before that we've got booleans, and that a boolean can be assigned with a let or a const as well. Just remember, if you use a const, you can't change its value again. So let d equal true, or I did true before, let's do false. Console.log d, and so I hit refresh, got Sally 5, I've got false, and I can see the line numbers that it's doing those console logs on. Okay, so those are your basic object-like variables. We've got these are all very common. You'll see them. In some languages, you have to define whether or not a number is an integer or not. Not in JavaScript. Under the hood, all numbers look the same. They're technically doubles. Don't worry about what that means. I'll again talk about that in a future variable, but or a future video. Let's just take a look. For instance, if I wanted e, well, I'll change the value of a. We'll make a equal to 3.14. And so I can save that now. I can console log a. And I refresh, and sure enough, it doesn't care if it's a whole number or has decimal places or negative. Oh, you know, just to prove on the negative. Oh look, minus pi. All right, anyway. So we've got numbers, we've got strings, and we've got booleans. I think we'll stop right there. In the next video, we'll talk about arrays and JavaScript objects. So, hope to see you again. Alright, if you like this video, please hit subscribe. Subscribe to my channel. I will provide more content in the future and keep it entertaining for you. Thanks a lot.